Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Before we begin this episode, I want to alert you that my latest book is now available in both print and ebook formats. The title is Love American Style, and it is a collection of short stories about men, women, their passions, and their dysfunctions. There's a short link in the episode notes that will take you to my Amazon profile page, where all 4 of my books are listed, 3 novels in this new short story collection. Again, the title of the new one is Love American Style, named after the TV series that ran from 1969 until 1974. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is best-selling author and Emmy award-winning television producer Paula Rizzo. She did the television production thing for nearly 20 years. She produced health, wellness, lifestyle segments with a range of top experts, and including Deepak Chopra and Jillian Michaels and so on. She also decided that she had enough of the television business. We'll find out why and how the decision was made, but she went into her own practice being a media strategist. And on top of that, she created a productivity site named listproducer.com. She's a best-selling author of Listful Thinking, Using Lists to Be More Productive, Highly Successful, and Less Stressed, which has been translated into 12 different languages and been featured on many media outlets, including Fox News, Fox Business, Prevention, Business Insider, even Oprah.com's list of self-help books that actually help. And there's not many that do, but Paula Rizzo has made that esteemed list, and that probably fairly emaciated list. So many of those self-help books out there they just don't do the trick. But they are voluminous. I mean, there's just so many of them. Now, her latest book is Listful Living, a list-making journey to a less stressed you. Let me say that again, a list-making journey to a less stressed you. And was published back in the fall of 2019. She's also a regular speaker and presenter at various conferences. New York Women in Communications, MA Conference for Women, Public Relations Society of America, and so on. And she works with entrepreneurs, celebrities, and authors, book publishers, authors, people who need some real help, people who tend to think, I want to write, I don't really want to spend my time marketing, or I'm no good at marketing, or do you realize how introverted I am? That's why I write for a living. I don't want to talk. I'm an introvert. That's why I sit down in a room by myself and open that vein and bleed it onto the page or the screen. So what is it that we need to do to make this stuff work for us? Because the competition is ferocious. Most of us don't know what the flip we're doing. And Paula Rizzo has spent a good part of her life figuring out exactly what we should be doing and helping people get there. Paula Rizzo, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. I am thrilled to help authors any way I possibly can.
Well, I said what you do, but that was very much a sketch. Talk about what you do. How do you, when somebody asks you in the elevator and you've got that elevator pitch to put out there, when they say, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
Well, I do primarily work with authors now, which I love, and I'm able to help authors talk about their books in media and on video and all the scary places that you might not want to be. But I can help you get over that fear and do it, because you have to be your book's best advocate. If you don't talk about it, no one else is going to know about it.
Now, why authors? You're an author. Authors tend not to, what does the average author make a year? Maybe $10,000. Yeah, there's the big names that make a lot, but so many really it's a labor of love, and they don't really necessarily have a lot in the way of resources. But what is it that attracts you to authors?
It is doable to be able to put yourself out there. The world has really changed a lot since I worked in television news. And, you're able to produce your own podcast. You could go live if you want to from your, Instagram or LinkedIn. These are resources that were not available, just several years ago. So you really are able to do so much more if you're willing to try, if you're willing to put yourself out there. And I love working with authors because I know, as a television producer, there were so many authors that I couldn't book, that I couldn't say yes to, that I couldn't have on the show because they weren't media ready. They just weren't there. And I didn't have the time to coach each one because I had a job to do and I had a segment to produce and I had to get on with my day. And it just broke my heart because there were so many great stories and so many great experts and books that I just, I didn't have the time to be able to help to put on the air. And it's just a missed opportunity. So I love to be able to give back in that way. And as an author, I know what happens when your book comes out. I know what happens when, the publisher moves on to the next shiny object and you're left with the book all on your own to promote. And you think, well, what do I do now?
Exactly. Now, so you, I'm sure, work with celebrity authors or business leaders who decide they want to write a book. So these are people of means, they're people of resources. What percentage, though, would you say is nonfiction versus fiction authors?
Definitely more nonfiction, for sure. I've worked with fiction authors as well, and I just recently actually finished a manuscript of my own. It's my first toe dipping into the fiction world, so I know how difficult it is to get that all done. And I do have a few people that I've worked with through the years and poets as well. But for the most part, it's nonfiction. Nonfiction just lends itself to be easier for media, to be able to get your book out there and to have topics that you can speak to. A lot of times, though, the best fiction authors that I've worked with are able to find nonfiction sort of, ideas in their book to be able to keep themselves front of mind when their book isn't always new. So they're able to talk about, the craft of writing or some sort of thing that's in their book, a theme that might be in there that they can speak to. And that really does help to continue the life of the book.
Now, you use the phrase media ready. What is a media ready author? What do they bring in terms of skill level or capabilities?
If a producer called you tomorrow or tonight, you would be able to jump on and do that interview. You would know what to wear. You would know where to look. You would be able to speak in sound bites. That's what I want for all of my clients. I produced a online course called Media Ready Author, actually, to be able to help some of the authors who, can't hire me one-on-one, aren't able to do that. But I want people to be ready so that if the media finds you first, which sometimes will happen because journalists are sneaky like that. They like to do research. They might find you. And if they call you and they say, hey, we would love to have you on and talk about this topic, I don't want you to say no, because if you say no, they may never call you back. And I know this because I was that producer. I would say, well, that one turned me down, so I'm going to go find somebody else. I'd find somebody else. They'd be great. And then that would be my go-to person. I'd forget even about the first person at all. So I didn't want that to happen. And, that's part of why I do what I do.
Well, and Paula Rizzo is clearly media ready. I mean, you never ask for a list of questions like, what are you going to be talking about with me? And you never really went back and forth with emails showing any kind of nerves for this. And you come right on and very, spontaneous. You can extemporize with the best of them, I'm sure. And that's what you're looking to do with your authors, with your clients, is make them ready to answer all manner of question and follow-up questions, I would imagine.
Absolutely. For sure. And it takes time. It's, I think that one of the things that people get intimidated by is that they see people who have been doing this for a long time, and they see people who look really polished, and they think, oh gosh, that's, they're just a natural. It's not true. It's a lot of preparation. It's being able to try different stories and try out different things and do all different kinds of media. And that allows you then to feel confident when you sit down that it doesn't even matter what the questions are because you know all the answers already.
Now, you also mentioned that you have an online course about being media ready. You have a multitude of online courses. So, and the reason I bring that up is because people are probably thinking, well, she's a polished pro, New York City, huge fees to have Paula Rizzo work with me. But there's the fallback position of, if I would even should even call it a fallback position, that you have online courses
where people can learn what to do without mortgaging the house.
Yeah, for sure. MediaReadyAuthor.com is where that training is. And it's the training that I would do with all of my one-on-one clients to begin with. And so I thought, you know what, why don't I produce this in a way, with videos, short videos, to be able to help any author who needs to get media ready, which is every single author. Because if you want your book to be out there, you need to do some promotion for it, right? And so that could be in the form of a podcast or television or your own videos or whatever it is. And I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor. So I do have a few courses on LinkedIn as well, about productivity and list making and some of that stuff, as well as media training. And that media training course is more geared towards leaders and executives. But all those principles really do help in any communication that you do. It doesn't just have to be, in the media.
Now, you sound like an on-air personality, but you're a producer.
Yeah.
So you weren't really on air, but you were making everything work. You were recruiting people to come on the program. I'm sure you did a bunch of setup for the on-air personality. Did you spend any time on air? Because you sound like an on-air person.
Oh, yeah, no, I actually was behind the scenes. I initially, when I first started in television, I thought, oh, I want to be a reporter, or I want to be an anchor. And then I realized that the producer was the one pulling all the strings and doing all the work behind the scenes. And I thought that is a much better spot for me. I would love to be able to do that and get all the ducks in a row. And so, yeah, I for years was the one behind the scenes to be able to get reporters and anchors ready for what we call their hits, right? For their TV hits, to be able to get up there and do their thing, and prepping them and coaching them and giving them information and, working with them in that way. And then the same thing for guests, being able to get them prepared and ready to say, okay, here are some of the questions that we might ask. And, this anchor sometimes goes off on a tangent, but if he goes off on a tangent, I need you to make sure to make these points, because I want to make sure that the viewers really get this information. And so it's a lot of coaching, and it's what now I do, with authors and executives every day.
So let's talk about that. Let's say an author comes to you and it's like, the online stuff just doesn't work for me. I'm not that kind of person. I need to be with somebody. I want you to be my media strategist. How do you work with an author? How much time commitment is there? How many hours a day or per week? Or give us kind of the model.
There are a lot of media trainers who say they will train you in an afternoon or train you in 2 hours or whatever it is. And I just don't think that's sustainable. So I've never taken that approach. I always like to work with people over time. So the one-on-one clients that I work with me for a minimum of 3 months. And what we do is, I typically give them that first sort of kickstart into what it means to be media ready, and give them all my best stuff up front. And then, we work together on their book and what are the frequently asked questions? What are the things that you want to be answering? I have a list of the frequent questions that are asked in the media of authors. So I make sure that we go over all of those questions and that they have answers to all of those questions ready to go in their mind, and we practice them. We do them over Zoom. I have them record videos and do homework in between our sessions so that they're working on this, and it's not only what you say, but how you look, what your background looks like, what you're going to wear. It really is a dress rehearsal for all these things, so that when the book comes out, or the book may already be out, but when the media calls you, you're able to say, oh, okay, well, I've already worked on this. I feel good about my lighting. I feel good about the microphone that I'm using and all of these things. It doesn't always come natural to people, so we do need to practice. And I love to be able to do that. And if, look, hey, a media interview comes up in the time that we're working together, even better, because we can use that to, to grow and watch it together after it's over, and really go through, the ins and outs of what we might do different next time and all of that. But it takes practice. It takes time. And I like to be able to train people over time, because then you can use these skills for any interaction that you're having, any conversation that you're having, to practice the way that I teach how to speak in sound bites. So I call it the accordion method, and having a short, a medium, and a long answer to any question that you're asked. So that if you're on television and you have a short time, you have that short answer ready. If you're on a podcast like this, you have that long answer where you can give examples and go on a little bit longer. But to be able to have those sort of in your back pocket ready to go, it takes time.
That's such an important point, that you are training people with a skill that it can be used in a lot of different venues. If you go to a book expo, or you have to be on a panel at a writers conference or what have you. Now I've got that accordion method down. I understand what I'm going to say. I understand the principles of being a good interviewee, and so on. So I have to tell you, for many years, having spent many years as a business journalist, I've seen a lot of, CEOs of companies who they don't have good voices.
Sure.
Their delivery is really deliberate. And it's kind of like you want to say, can you talk like a New Yorker? Not the accent, but just a tempo. I mean, come on, pick it up, pick it up. Right. People are listening. You got to keep that energy level up to keep the audience going. The other thing I would always say when I was in charge of the event, I'd go to the soundboard and I'd keep those microphones hot. I don't want people, and if somebody's got a lower voice, like for instance, panel discussion, if somebody's got a lower voice, their mic needs to be hotter. I always felt like when the room was just full of sound, it was, nobody had trouble hearing, of course. And you can overdo that too. But then on top of that, it just raises the energy level. And I think people who talk at your tempo create more energy than somebody who's giving elliptical responses, that sort of thing.
For sure. It takes work. This is a performance. You have to treat it that way. Every single time that you're speaking, it's like you're an actor almost in a way, right? You have to bring your best stuff because you can't always think that the interviewer is going to have this great energy or be super interested in your topic. You have to be super interested. You have to bring that energy every single time that you do an interview.
You mentioned examples. Give us an example of an author who you felt like you took from A to Z, or let's say a 1 or 2 to a 10, with protecting their identity if you have to. That's usually the case when somebody's a client. What example can you give us of somebody who really responded to your training and did well?
I've had a lot of clients through the years who were, very curious about producing video or, really wanted to do podcasts and just had no experience with it and were very intimidated, even by, the equipment, even by having an external camera or having a microphone. So even that, there were people who I took from never having done anything, a lot of speakers, I would say, people who were used to being in person, where they're used to getting feedback live from the audience. You can see, did that joke land? Do people think I'm funny? Is that, are people falling asleep? What is happening here? When you're doing video, you don't have that response. And so it can be really difficult for people to keep the energy up and to keep their interest up, frankly, right? I've had clients who have done no video at all and just been very intimidated by it, to be able to, go off and produce their own videos. Now, I had one client who was terrified of doing it. And she really did not want to. She knew she had to because she had to be the voice and the face of her brand. But she really was not that willing. And now she does videos all the time. And it was one of those things where, I said to her, she was having issues at the time. She was a vegan cook, and she had a husband who had gout and this is awful condition. And so she found that if she started to cook these vegan dishes, that he didn't have the gout, he didn't have the symptoms. So I said, wouldn't you have loved to have that information back when you were struggling and you guys were, canceling vacations and he couldn't get out of bed and all? She's, oh, of course, I wish I had known. I said, well, that's you now. You're that person. How dare you keep this information to yourself? You need to help as many people as possible. If one person watches your video or sees this or whatever it is that you're working on, you can change people's lives. And I think when you reframe it that way, then people realize, oh, this is a little bit bigger than just a book. This is just bigger than me just doing this one thing. This could actually really, be a public service and help people.
Well, as a vegetarian, not a vegan, but a vegetarian, listeners take note. Get that uric acid out of your diet. You're going to end up in bed in pain. Eat a healthy diet. Get rid of the meat. Get rid of the bottom feeder fish at the least. You don't want those heavy metals in your system. So you made another good point. Several good points, including that once a person has facility with speaking and they're comfortable with a microphone or even in front of a camera lens, they can start producing their own videos. And right now, there's so many channels for that. You've got TikTok, you have Instagram, you have Facebook, or even LinkedIn. The list goes on. So all of a sudden, a person can take that and turn it into a omni-channel marketing program for themselves, or maybe they don't even necessarily think of it as marketing, but being able to communicate to people for whatever purpose. Maybe it's to clean up their diets and get rid of gout. Maybe it's to get them. There's a lot of relationship stuff I notice on Instagram and TikTok. Some very good relationship stuff where it's a relationship expert coming on and talking about why a particular aspect of a relationship goes bad or what have you. There's a lot of opportunity out there. You're in New York, the epicenter of book publishing. How do you find your clients? I mean, I obviously you have a reputation, but I'm sure it's not strictly coming over the transom. Are you targeting certain people that you know that this could be a home run for this person, and I would love to have them as a client? How does it all work?
A lot of it's word of mouth. It's a lot of people who, know me, my prior job as a television producer, publicists or even people in phishing who I'd work with, through the years that would pitch me stories, and now they know me in this next phase of my career. And so we continue working together. It happens a lot, and then from there, it just becomes word of mouth. I do a lot with LinkedIn Learning, and then Writer's Digest. I write a column for Writer's Digest, which, is it frankly is a great way to get these things out into the world in a different way. So I'm always thinking video first. And I've always believed it's very important to be your own producer. So to not wait for media to come to you, but to produce your own content. And for me, it's always usually video first. And then from there, I'll have it transcribed and turn that into a blog post or whatever it is. But it's important for writers, especially, to read things. Not everybody is so interested in watching the videos, and the videos are very important, of course. Every social media platform now has an algorithm that loves video, so you'll probably see video more than anything else. But I realize that authors and writers read, they're not just watching videos. And so to position myself and put myself in places that I know they'll be, speaking at conferences that are geared just towards authors. And, it's for me, it's also, beneficial. I want to be there too. I want to learn. I'm constantly learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I love to, meet new people and find out new things I don't, know about. And so being able to go to these conferences and all of that, really, it feeds me both professionally and personally.
And it was because of your column in Writer's Digest that I found you, and I immediately reached out to you. And normally I'm booking people months out. But I moved you right up on the schedule because I wanted to make sure to get you out there, because I just think what you have to say is very useful to the audience out there, to anybody who's writing or looking to promote themselves. Now, talk a little bit about, let's talk about your career path towards becoming a television producer. First of all, where were you born? Where did you go to school, college? What did you study in college? And I'm always curious whether it's a straight line or somebody studied something like philosophy, and lo and behold, I ended up in the TV business.
Oh, no, I studied broadcast journalism was my major and political science was my minor. I went to Hofstra University on Long Island, and I was born in Brooklyn. I grew up on Long Island and then, moved into the city and to Queens and all of that. And I was always just fascinated with the news business. I remember a friend of mine I guess it was elementary school. Her dad was a cameraman for ABC. And I remember one time he took us to work, me and her, and it was so fun. I think it was elementary school or something. And he took us in and he said, "Oh, I'll show you the news, it was Peter Jennings at the time.
Mm.
And he took us into his office, into his studio, and he showed us all around. And I thought, this is very cool. I'm very interested in this. And so, I kind of forgot about that. I went to college and I thought, oh, I'll probably be a magazine writer or something. And then they make you take broadcast classes. And as soon as I took a broadcast class, I thought, oh, this is for me. It's quick, it's concise, it's to the point. And I fell in love with it. And I just, went from there working as soon as I could, doing an internship at a local television station, and then just going from there.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because I went to school for basically, well, I ended up with a journalism degree and a minor in political science like you did. But I started off in the broadcast program. And then I decided, I don't really feel like I'm the camera guy. I mean, I've changed, of course, over time. Now I'd love to be in front of a camera. I like having a microphone in front of me, like being in front of a live audience. So I ended up switching over to journalism because I thought I want to be behind the scenes and writing. And but over time, things change. And but you knew that right away. And I knew it right away. And it was the right decision for me at the time. But, I became more and more extroverted over time. So interesting. So what made you decide, after an Emmy Award winning TV career as a TV producer, to go out on your own as a media strategist? What was the telling event, or was it something that was a process over a long period of time?
I had my first book, Listful Thinking, come out while I was still working in television. And, that was kind of difficult because, you want to be present and do your job as well as possible, but you also sort of have this thing in the back of your mind, percolating and things happening. And I was doing a lot of speaking, and I started to see there was a world outside of just working in the news business every single day. And I could do more with the skills that I had elsewhere. And I was excited by that. And I actually, when my second book came out, I was out on my own, and it was different to be out in the world and not with a media outlet. I mean, you're a journalist. You say you work for a certain outlet, the door is open, people want you, you leave, you say you work for yourself, no one cares sometimes. So you do need to sort of build that brand up for yourself. But I just knew, there was more for me out there, and more people I could help. And I wanted to be able to speak and go do things and coach people without it being a conflict, because that, I couldn't do what I do now while working, in a TV environment. It just wouldn't be fair to anybody. But I love working for myself. I found it's been 7 years. This past weekend was 7 years. So it's incredible to think about, doing that. And I'm glad that I made the leap. It's been exciting and scary and fun every single day.
I bet. So, talk about some of the best tools available, excuse me, for the author who's looking to sell books and build a brand. Actually, do you think in terms of brand, building a brand, we tend to think of companies, but there are clearly people who have a brand as well. Do you talk about that with your clients, or is that something you'd reserve only for certain clients that really have kind of the scaffolding in place to actually accomplish that?
Well, you're the brand, each author is the brand. So you do need to be out there talking about what you do, what you know, what you've written, and people won't know unless you tell them. So it's really important to put yourself out there. And if you've written a book.
But what if they say to you, but a brand has to have, for instance, if I see the Mercedes-Benz symbol or the BMW symbol, I think the ultimate driving machine,
right,
or German engineering. It's specific in that way. If I think of an author, I mean, so I guess my point is, do you ever have people saying, I feel like I need, it can't, yeah, okay, I am who I am. But when people think of Paula Rizzo or Mike Consol, I want them to think immediately of something specific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, look,
people it's very hard to do. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do on an individual level, unless you're I mean, Paris Hilton as a brand, I would
Sure.
say.
Sure.
Things immediately come to mind with her. I think that's and that's kind of a double-edged sword as well. Anyway, I'm
I think it has
throwing
to
too
do
many
with
words at you.
no, I think it has to do with what you're producing, what you put out in the world for the longest time and still to this day. I talk about lists and list making and productivity more than most people, right? And so a lot of times, media remembers me for that. They come to me and they say, "Oh yeah, Paula, the list lady. Oh yeah, you wrote those books about lists." Like they remember that. It's because I talk about it more than anybody else. I didn't invent lists, right? This is not something that I came up with on my own. I just, use them in a different way. I use them to help people. And I think the crux of this whole thing is that you want people to fall in love with you and to really like you as the brand, as the expert, as the author. Because if they do, they will buy anything that you have. It won't even really matter what the book is. They'll just like you. And that's why video and even podcasts, that intimate experience that you have with an author is so important because that is really the line to get to know them. That's how you can sort of, show your personality and show who you are and get people to like you and say, "Oh, you know what? I like that Mike guy. What's the book that he has? Let me check that out." That's what you want.
Well, or Anne Rice is known as the Vampire Woman. She was
Right.
known as the Vampire Woman. Stephen King is, the horror guy who lives in the big freaky looking house out there in Bangor, Maine, and so on. You get associated with. I mean, if you're a really well known author, you get associated with a particular genre or a particular thing that John le Carre, obviously, international espionage and so on. What are the best tools these days for an author to sell books and to build their market awareness? I mean, there's all these social media channels. We talk about podcasts and all this. Is there any one or two that you see these days as being particularly powerful?
Well, I think you need to be seen. It's almost like it doesn't even really matter what you're saying. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's true. It doesn't even matter. I do tons of television segments and tons of things. People don't really watch them, after a while, they're like, "Oh, there she is doing her thing again," whatever. But the fact that I do it, I feel like gives you enough cachet to really, then propel you into doing something else, speaking at conferences and doing all those types of things. So to be seen, to be out there, to say yes, I think that's important. A lot of times people think, "Oh, well, I already did an interview, I already did a podcast, I already did, but really saying yes and repurposing that content into your own content is really important because you can't think, "Oh, one person maybe saw it one time." It doesn't matter. There's a lot of opportunity to reuse the content that's out there, and you can use that in any social media platform that you want to. And I think it really depends on what excites you. And I know a lot of people think, "Oh, another social media platform, another new thing, another to do." And, I look at it like that sometimes too, but I also think, okay, how can I reach people? Who are the people I want to reach? Where are they? What are the things that they're using? So for me, Instagram has been great. LinkedIn has been great to be able to connect with people. I do a live stream show that it broadcasts on YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter, I guess X now. And it's just it's good brand awareness to show that I'm talking about these topics and I'm out there, and people will sometimes say, "Oh yeah, I saw your show," and it's a repurposed show that I did from last year or something, So it's like, you don't have to constantly be producing brand new things. You can take some of what you've already done and reuse it in different ways for different platforms. And also, you wrote a whole book. You have a lot of content. You have tons of stuff that you can, go to the well and use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I saved this for the end. You have a list, assuming you're amenable, you have developed a list of 10 questions every author needs to answer. And I'd like to go through that list if you're amenable.
Sure. I have
Okay.
to get the list. Hold on. I know the first few off the top of my head, but I don't know them all.
Well, and to our listeners, in the episode notes, you'll see a link to Paula's website and also a link to the 10 questions every author needs to answer. It's a download that you can do from there. Is that free of charge, Paula?
It is, yes. You put your email in there and I will send it right to you. And that way you'll be able to open it up, check out the questions, and do it for yourself. This is what I do with all of my one-on-one clients. I have them go through this entire list. That's how this started. And I thought, oh, what a good freebie for people, because it is important to go through. And a lot of times people think, oh, I'll be fine if I go on and I'm asked some questions on a podcast, I'll be fine. And the truth of the matter is you're not fine. You have to practice. You have to think about what you're going to talk about. You have to say the words out loud. You have to hear how you say things. Can you say certain words? The word lists, such a hard word to say. I wish I had thought of that when I started this brand of mine, but there's certain words that maybe, it doesn't work for you. So you're going to work around it. You have to practice these things and say these things out loud.
What would you have used instead? Do you know?
Oh, I can't even imagine. It's just I read both the audiobooks for my books, and to say lists so many times, it was so hard. I was so mad at myself.
I get it. I can imagine. Okay, so the 10 questions. What's question number 1?
Okay, what is this book about? And that can be one of the most difficult questions. And I know because, people ask me when I'm talking about fiction or whatever it is I'm working on, what's the book about? And it's like, oh gosh, it's so intimidating. But it's so important to have a concise answer to be able to crystallize it so people remember. You want it to be something that people can repeat. And you can easily just come right to the top of mind. It's something that you might have to work at a little bit, but it's very important to be able to do that.
Gotcha. What's number 2?
Then we talk about who is the book for. Now, this is important for many reasons because, it depends also what outlet you're speaking to, because you're going to answer questions differently depending on if you're on a podcast or if you're on something for financial advisors or, depending on who it is. So you want to be able to have this answer, and the answer can't be, oh, the book's for everybody. Book can't be for everybody. It has to be for a specific set of people. And then you talk about the book differently depending on who the audience is.
How about number 3?
Why did you write this book? Now, this is very important because this gets to then the crux of the personal story, which I find to be very interesting. And a lot of times people leave that out because they think, oh, well, it's, I don't want it to be all about me. But the truth of the matter is that it gets more interesting if I understand as the listener, as the viewer, your motivations. And I understand why you've tackled this topic, then it makes it a little bit more endearing to me. Or I say, oh, well, you fixed a problem for yourself. That's interesting, or whatever it is. And this is often overlooked by a lot of people because they think, oh, people don't care about that. They do. And it can really inform a lot of what you talk about.
One of the maxims of communication and building relationships and all that gets repeated fairly often is the you want to make it personal. The more personal, the more people connect with it. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. They remember stories. They remember people. It's really a great way to connect.
Exactly. So that was what, number 3?
Yep.
What do you got for number 4?
What is the biggest misconception about this topic? And I asked this question because I used to ask this a lot as a producer, because I'd always want to know what do people think and how is this different, right? And what are you talking about a little, you always want to think of the counterintuitiveness of what it is you're talking about and how you can kind of flip it for people. So it's always kind of important to think about.
So that probably oftentimes set up a good question for your interviewer, for the on-air personality who's going to interview your person. Is
exactly.
It correct? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
For
How
sure.
about number 5?
What is the one thing you want people to take away from this book? And this is something that often reporters, anchors will just throw out there. It's a very generic type of question, but if you haven't thought about it, you're like, oh gosh, one thing? I don't know. What could it be? One thing. You have to have many one things in your mind, right? But if you're asked this, to be able to come up just concisely and say, oh, okay, well, here's one thing. And you have to think about that in advance.
Yeah. William Safire, the great New York Times columnist, late great New York Times columnist, used to say, when you get up in front of an audience to speak, when you get up there, tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them. And then at the end, you tell them what you told them.
Yes.
It was like you need to reinforce it. People, we don't realize oftentimes that even though we speak the same language, people don't pick up, they're not going to collect 100% of what we're saying. And if there's not some repetition to it, And that we have to be careful about as well. But the idea being that, make sure, I mean, when you say it up front, I'm going to talk to you about this,
Right.
then they're primed to receive it. And then I think they track it so much better. And then, of course, you tell it to them, then by the end, putting the punctuation or the exclamation point on it, I think it sounds so simple, but it's actually quite brilliant.
It's true. It's a very good system, really, for anything you want to talk about.
So number 6.
How did you come up with the title? This is always interesting because, people, especially with my titles, Listful Thinking, Listful Living, often people will ask, oh, how did the title come about? And so you want to be able to have that in your mind and not just say, oh, yeah, I just came up with it one day. That's not very exciting, right? So you want to be able to have something to say in case you're asked this.
When I do cover profiles for the magazine I'm editor of, anytime they have a firm with a name that has anything interesting, just recently Sanctuary Wealth or Sanctuary. Okay. And I ask, what's the story behind the name? And a lot of times there's a story. A lot of times there isn't, but sometimes there's a really interesting story, and it just makes you all the more connected or have a better feel for the firm and how it sees itself. And it's kind of a brand builder for the firm if people understand that.
It's memorable. Yeah.
Yes. And exactly. You always want to be memorable. There's been times when I've seen firms that a lot of firms these days want to reduce their name to an acronym. And it's oftentimes, we have way too many acronyms to begin with, but a lot of times it's not a very good acronym. It's more than 3 letters, let's say, and it's just a bad play. What about number 7?
What was the hardest part for you to write? And this is geared towards, hopefully it's part, your personal story or whatever it is, to be able to talk through that, or, where it could be funny, could be, oh, it was really hard to get this interview or whatever it was. But to just think about these questions and the answers, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be that someone asks you this specific question. But when you start to think about the answer, you can say, oh, you know what? This is actually like a fun anecdote that I can throw in at any point, when we're talking about certain things of the writing process or whatever it is. So it's really like these questions are geared to get you thinking. It doesn't have to be that people ask you exactly verbatim these questions, but it's a good exercise for you to start thinking about what your answers might be and some good stories.
Is there a hardest part of writing the book that stands out, one that you've heard over and over again, or is it all over the map?
A lot of times, people say just finishing it, getting to the final, to the end, right? And so, that I feel like, in itself, knowing how difficult it is to finish a book and go through the publishing process, it's amazing that people actually write and publish books. It actually, that whole process is just kind of crazy.
Yeah. And, so often with, certainly with fiction books, I notice that you can tell the author just rushed the end. It was just kind of like, whoa, I'm up to 450 pages. I need to close this
Let's
thing
end
out.
this.
And
right.
then they just rush, and it's kind of like, whoa, it's like, what happened? It was like a car accident, and all of a sudden it's over, and I'm not really sure what happened.
Right.
So kind of weird that way. What are we up to? Number 8?
Number 8, yes. What is one thing people can do right now? So this is similar to the other question about, what is the one thing you want people to take away from the book? But this way you have an actionable thing that people can do. And this works obviously really well for nonfiction. But what is it that you want people to do? What can they do right now? And to give like one tip, one thing that people can walk away from listening to this interview or after they've read the book or whatever it is to be able to do, right? What is your next best step?
I would imagine that if you can give a person something that they can do right off the bat and it works for them, now all of a sudden they're interested in everything else you had to say. And it kind of sets the table and builds confidence that you're giving me good information. That worked for me. I'm gonna get to these other 9 or 10 or 11 steps or what have you.
Yeah, they're invested, you've given them something, they've tried it out, and they think, okay, well, if the free stuff you're giving is this good, I can't wait to read the stuff that I have to pay for, so hopefully that's the idea.
Yes. And the final the final suggestion here, number 10, the final question that every author needs to ask himself or herself is what?
Well, 9 and 10 are kind of similar. So 9 is, do you have a last or final message? And then 10 is, what is your best tip? Now, these are meant to get you thinking in case the person who's interviewing you kind of just tosses these questions out, kind of say, oh, what else you got? You have any more tips? I mean, it happens all the time because the same thing, the anchor or whoever it is, they're like thinking about the next segment, right? As soon as you get off the stage, they have somebody else they have to interview about something else. So it might happen. So I just want authors to have thought of this and to have a few things that they can, go to right away. People say, what's your best tip, or, what's one final message? Like I typically will say, if people ask me that about list making, or, I say, look, don't be so hard on yourself. We're so hard on ourselves. We are so, we give so much pressure to ourselves into getting things done and to not checking everything off the list and all this, and it's just a nice sort of way to end on a positive note. So to think about, like, what is the last thing you want people to remember?
Absolutely. So again, great suggestions. And again, the listeners, the link to download that list is in the episode notes. My guest has been Paula Rizzo, and she operates under her own name. So it's paularizzo.com. That link is in the episode notes as well. You can learn a lot more about her, check out her online courses, her books. And although she's a media strategist, she really specializes in published authors. Paula, it's been great speaking with you. Love your energy and love these suggestions that you make. It's been a whirlwind 45 minutes.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.